Hey guys, welcome back. Today we will take a look at that Jung quotation, "The child bears no greater burden than the unlived life of the parent," however it's translated. The idea is that children are unknowing receptacles of their parents' psychological blind spots. But what are these blind spots? What is this unlived life? How does it burden children? Even in the midst of the best intentions, we will answer all this and more today on this channel through the lens of a children's book that I came across, How to Train Your Amygdala by Anna Housley-Juster. So first, we'll cover what's in the book, do a quick overview, then 2 reasons why this book exemplifies that Jung quotation, what Jung means by unlived life of the parents, and then we'll talk about how you can spare children the burden of your unlived life. How to really do it. So first to the book, an overview. It is categorized as juvenile. So I'm thinking it's for children like 8 to 12, something like that. Gives you a pronunciation, amygdala, but not etymology. The etymology of amygdala, of course, is it's Greek for almond because it looks like an almond, and I think this would be a good place to put it. I don't know. Maybe it's ancillary information, unnecessary. Then the book discusses what an amygdala does. That it controls your fight and flight response, it controls your anger response, gives an example of why we need an amygdala, why it's useful. You're crossing the street and you see a car, your amygdala tells you to freeze. And then it shows maybe an example of the amygdala being overly sensitive or overly active, one could say. There's a sound in the hallway, you're not sure what it is, but then you go and check on the sound and it's just a cat rummaging through a pizza box. Then in the book, the amygdala says, this guy's the amygdala. I don't know if that was obvious. The amygdala says, hey, help me, train me. I need your help to train me. That's what the amygdala says. It says, just like you would train a puppy. It uses that comparison. Make a note of that. We'll come back to it. It also says, the amygdala says, I don't always have to set off the alarm. We'll come back to that one too. So the training is take deep breaths, think of a happy place or a happy person. Yeah, just think of your mom. Don't actually talk to your mom. Just think of your mom. Okay. You see where this is going and get ahead of myself. And then the third training is, of course, you squeeze a pillow. And as you're squeezing the pillow, you're imagining that the pillow is your amygdala and you're hugging it. You're calming it down. Because that's what an 11-year-old boy who's afraid needs to do. He needs to squeeze a pillow. And then once you calm down, so the book's credit somewhat, then once you calm down, the book says, then you go talk to a parent. And then the parent's pictured. Once you calm down, though. So we'll come back to that as well. So there's 2 main points of darkness, examples of an unlived life in this book. The first one is that, and I guess they kind of feed off each other. The first one says that it's okay for children to isolate, to experience emotions alone. The second area of darkness is it doesn't understand emotional regulation. I mean, even in that word train, how to train your amygdala shows a poor understanding of neuroscience, frankly, let alone philosophy. So the first point there, children are not supposed to regulate emotions alone. This is not how we regulate emotions. I mean, adults can regulate emotions alone, especially if they have a stronger foundation of, regulating in the context of other people. But ideally, you don't. And the concept behind this, popularized by Jung, is psychic objectivity, which says that you cannot experience an emotion subjectively until you experience it objectively. You don't see yourself until you see someone else see you. I mean, it seems, I guess, kind of like a weird concept, but just think about it. If you spend $500 on a golf club, and you don't want to tell your wife because you're afraid of what your wife's reaction will be. Now, if you spend $500 and you don't care what your wife's reactions will be, if you're not afraid of it, then there's no issue. None of this applies. This is just for psychological issues. But let's say you spent the money, you're afraid of what your wife's reaction will be. My question to you is, do you really see the price of the golf club? Yeah, I mean, in a financial, arithmetic maybe context, you understand what $500 is, but there's the price, right? There's reality, then there's our relationship with reality. There's the price of the club, then there's our relationship with that price or even the club or the sport of golf. Right? There are feelings you have about that price that are unconscious, that you're afraid of coming up. Otherwise, you wouldn't be afraid of telling your wife. So let's say you tell her and she's upset with you. Is she right? Is she wrong? That's the issue. I mean, I don't know whether she's right or wrong. Who cares? The point is, you're vague about it. You're unsure. I mean, you don't really see the price of the club. You have no real relationship with the price of the club or what that club is, because you're not sure whether it is the right or wrong thing to do. So there's your blind spot. That's what you need to clear up to create a better relationship with that club, i.e. reality. Or maybe you tell her and she's happy. You've had a good year and she knows you like golf. Who cares? It's $500, whatever. Okay, so now, the reason why you were afraid speaks to another issue. There's another blind spot there. Namely, your guilt complex was coming up. Or you tell your wife and she's happy for you. And in fact, this is what your wife likes about you. That you can spend money on yourself, that you can treat yourself. Let's say your wife grew up in poverty, or she didn't grow up in poverty, but maybe her mom's anxiety made it seem like they were always in poverty. So she has a very difficult time spending money on herself, treating herself. And in fact, she likes having you around because you're a good model for exactly that. And, of course, when done in a certain context, with the right intention, I mean, treating yourself to something is as vital to earning money as the earning of the money itself. And the reason why this works, of course, is it's your wife, somebody close to you, somebody who understands you. You've shared a lot of experiences with her. She knows your failures. She knows your successes, which is, of course, why you're afraid to tell her in the first place, is because she is important to you. So her response does matter. Now you can tell some random guy at the pro shop what the price of the club is. And I think that helps with awareness too, just to hear those words pass over your lips. But, yeah, just to hear those words pass over your lips. I thought there was something coming up there. That can help with the awareness too. But, that's effectively what a therapist is the therapist is a stepping stone to that which is more objective, to the more important. I mean, the point of a therapist is he's not important to you at all. He's totally outside the context of your social hierarchy. I mean, to you, he's just like the weird guy who lives in the woods. Like confidentiality, like, yeah, well, like, who's he going to tell? He doesn't have any friends. So, yeah. Where were we? Back to my point. Yeah. If you need the presence of your wife to see what the club costs, to see what the price of the club means, or even what the club means to you, or what the sport of golf means to you, then children definitely need their parents, which is effectively reality for the child. The parent is reality for the child. They need their parents to relate with, to identify, to see, to use something that is, of course, way more abstract than the price of a golf club, and that is their emotions. Of course they need that. When you think about it, of course we need other people to regulate. I mean, emotion is an action state. Like we need to see the emotions of others like we see the actions of others. To know what you're doing. Do I work with you? Do I work against you? Do I try to stop you? Do I help you? Are we on the same page? Can we work together? This is what made us humans, is to be able to communicate this information. And we need to communicate it as we're feeling it. This is why, in part, it has to be why we have such large evolutionarily wasteful brains, is to communicate this kind of information. This is an AI generated image, and when I made the image, I said, be sure to include a lot of man butt in it. Which is, I think a good, it's a good way to depict evolution, is just look at butts. Because chimps and monkeys, they can't walk upright, so they don't have any butts like dogs. Anyway, that's why we became humans, is our ability to do this very well. And when we don't do this well, when you have a 10-year-old who's feeling anxious and his first response is, I need to isolate and calm myself down, he's freaking out. He is definitely freaking out. He can't tell you because he has no frame of reference. So you can't ask him, is this okay? Is this not okay? He has no frame of reference for that. That's not his responsibility. And look, it's good to experience emotions alone too. That's the other side of the psychic objectivity coin, but definitely not at the expense of experiencing emotions with others. Right? Darkness in the parents comes to light in children. This is how it works. A child who experiences an intense emotion alone, there's no frame of reference for it. What the parent doesn't see becomes reality for the child. The child processes unconscious issues of the parent as reality. That's how he sees them. When he feels an intense emotion, he doesn't know how to use it, whether it's okay, whether it's not okay. And because there's a lot of darkness around it now, a lot of isolation, he must necessarily act out. And he will. He may even think, he may be so uncomfortable with himself and experience this existential dread on such a, to him, metaphysical level that he thinks the only way to get out of it is to effectively kill himself or, kill himself by becoming a different gender. Though, of course, but by the way, what would Anna Housley Juster say if she was here? If she was here arguing me, what would she say? She would say, well, Mark, look at all this research. We introduced this. We actually went to the same graduate school, so it's funny. I've sat through these presentations. She would say, look at all this research. Like, we introduced these mindfulness exercises to these fourth graders. And look at these constructs. Look at these metrics. They calm down. Look at these constructs we created to prove our point and justify our worldview. Look, I'm not saying psychological studies are never good, of course. We need them, but they're not a replacement for thought, and if you're researching emotional regulation, but you don't understand what emotions are, what the principles are behind them, how they work, what emotions necessarily must be if humans are even to have emotions in the first place and use them in the context that we use them. If you don't understand that first, then all the research in the world's not going to matter. In fact, it's probably going to be counterproductive. Well, that's the darkness, because you don't know what those things are. And of course, the other reason why this book exemplifies the unlived life of the parent is, well, it kind of goes off the first point, right? It indicates that emotions are wrong. It indicates emotions are wrong, or at least lower. And it's right there in the title, like I was saying, how to train your amygdala, not how to connect with your amygdala, not how to listen to, not how to understand, not how to use your amygdala in context in conjunction with your cortex or your hippocampus, nothing like that. How to train your amygdala, which of course is an example of the mind-body dichotomy, the amygdala, the emotions, the body, whatever you want to call it. It's beneath you, as indicated by that word train. But even then, the joke about that is, train me, when the amygdala says, train me like you would train a dog, the joke is, even when you train a dog, the important part of that is listening to the dog. How do you decode what the dog's trying to tell you? The dog's trying to tell you lots of things. You just don't know how to decode it. And in fact, once you can listen to the dog very well, the dog will, in effect, tell you what it needs to do for you to train him. Not to mention, when Lassie tells you that Timmy's in the well. So yeah, just totally misconstrues this relationship between the cortex and the amygdala. A well-regulated amygdala, or well-regulated emotions, doesn't mean a calmer, smaller, less active amygdala. It doesn't mean that. For at least the past 10 years, all the research points to, no, regulation is, your amygdala can be active, it can be inactive. What matters more is, how does your amygdala connect with your cortex? Your prefrontal cortex. How does it work in conjunction? How does it connect with your hippocampus? What is the relative size of the amygdala compared with the hippocampus, right? All that matters way more. You can't just look at the amygdala. So the idea of that the boy's like calming down his amygdala by hugging it it's effectively teaching kids how to repress their emotions very well. And of course, everybody's calmer. Everybody's better behaved right after, they repress their emotions. That's why we do it, because it works very well short term. And also back to the book, just to tie a ribbon on this point, when the book says, hey, I don't always have to set off the alarm. No, you obviously don't always have to set off the alarm, but why is it a problem if you do? Why are you implying it's a problem if the amygdala, the amygdala is always setting off alarms? You can't place any normative claim on that. It's neither good nor bad. And in fact, even the example that they give, it proves my point. Yeah, most of the time, if your amygdala is overactive, the threat, it looks way worse in your imagination. So you just continue to confront threats that aren't going to kill you. And a juvenile, an 8 to 12-year-old knows the difference between investigating a noise, in the hallway and a car coming at you. Which, of course, is how you really hug your amygdala, if you want to use that, is by acting, by moving, by talking. Psychologically, talking is moving. It is acting, no matter how you feel. You're allowed to move. You're allowed to confront threats, even if you're really afraid. You don't have to calm yourself down first. In fact, that spares you the energy that you need to really face that thing for what it is. So, how do you really want to help kids out if you want to? If you care about helping kids out at all, how do you spare children the burden of your unlived life? I guess I'm kind of said all this, but you need to listen, right? And you're not going to listen until you can regulate. No, you're not going to listen to your child's emotions until you can listen to your own emotions. And there's a quotation for the wall of your cafe gratitude, right? There's no replacement for working on your own issues, which is, what this book needs to be about, which is what every parenting book needs to be about, which is why child psychology effectively doesn't exist. I'm not saying that child psychologists are useless. I think it is helpful to talk with a child alone, but interventions on the child aren't going to work unless you're intervening with the parents or the primary caregiver with their reality. And why does child psychology not exist? Because metaphysically, children are not responsible for their emotions. They don't have a developed enough brain to be able to do to be able to calm down like this and do it in a healthy way. Children aren't responsible for their actions, let alone their emotions, let alone the brain states that lead to the actions in the first place. And so when you put that kind of responsibility on a child, that is emotional pedophilia. I'm not using that term to be strident. I'm using that correctly here. Like my client who I talked about in grad school, who went to a support group on accident. He went to a support group for victims of incest, an incest survivor support group. And he fit right in. He's not a victim of incest. He's a victim of a Oedipal mother. And that day he learned that those two things, having an Oedipal mother and an emotionally incestuous relationship with the mom is, it is different than having a physically incestuous relationship, but, not different by enough. The unlived life of the parent is the greatest burden on the children. Emotions that the parent represses, the children will act out. The silent generation didn't talk, so the boomers screamed. And conversely, I guess this is what I was saying before. This is why parenting books are mostly pointless. If your children will unconsciously process your blind spots as reality, then parenting comes down to how well you can relate with your unconscious. A technique can serve as a guidance, but it's not going to cover up for these blind spots. I was thinking of just a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, but Matt Walsh was criticizing gentle parenting. And all gentle parenting says is that when you give a child a boundary, keep all your boundaries the way they were. But when you give a child a boundary, you need to empathize with them emotionally. But empathy, but Matt Walsh hears this as don't have boundaries with children. Why? Because it's all in how Matt Walsh relates with his unconscious, which he indicates in how he goes about criticizing gentle parenting. Empathy to him is weakness because he's emotionally weak, because he has dysregulated emotions. So he has no concept for something like a gentle boundary. It's a confession of his unlived life, of his unprocessed emotions, not to mention his split epistemology. And of course, if your children are old enough, if they're juvenile, if they're 8 to 12, you can teach them how emotions work. You're at this channel, you know how emotions work. You can, obviously don't subject your children to my 45-minute resentment-fueled tirades, but, they're angry. Which is, when kids are upset, unless they're a little bit older, it's because they're angry. They're not really afraid. They're angry, Oh, your brother took your toy. Okay, that's what you need. It's okay. You can tell me what you need. You can talk to me. You can continue to speak and move, psychologically at least, no matter what you're feeling. That's what that intense feeling of anger. And it's not, right? It's not a diluted anger. It's not an anger that you're expressing to me after you've already repressed the more, the harsher aspects of it. It's how you really feel. And I'm here as your frame of reference, as your reality to say, yeah, that's okay. What do you need? Tell me what you need. Put words to it. Or if the child's anxious, yeah, it's okay to be anxious. In fact, it's good. I'm glad you're anxious. I know it's uncomfortable. You don't have to calm yourself down before you tell me. So yeah, you know how this stuff works. So you can just, talk them through it as much as you can. You don't have to be exact, but you just understand the basic idea behind emotions, which of course is the most fundamental blind spot here in this book. I mean, what I was saying earlier, like you're doing all this research on emotional regulations. You can't even tell me what an emotion is. You can't tell me how it works. So why would you have children just calm themselves down just for the sake of calming themselves down? Like that's necessarily a good thing. And of course, stories, right? I mean, this is why we have stories, to show us what we need to go through to change. I mean, there's literally a movie called How to Train Your Dragon. Oh, look, it looks like a juvenile, a boy who's about 12, and he's learning how to manage his unruly nature, as symbolized by the dragon, his unconscious emotions. And the struggles that he goes through in this movie, I'm sure, show us exactly what we need to go through. Talk with them about it. Talk with your 10-year-old about this. You'd be surprised. I mean, 10-year-olds are smart. Go watch Predator. I mean, talk about a movie that shows, that forces. Yeah, it shows Ben feeling the whole gamut of emotions and speaking to it and handling these conflicts. It shows you what happens and how to identify these, what happens when the jungle, when you're unconscious, comes alive. And it starts moving and starts affecting you outside of your conscious awareness. I mean, it's just great symbolism that obviously kids don't need to get explicitly, but they get it. The irony is, though, how Anna Housley-Juster, in trying to take responsibility for that which is outside of her control, namely how to raise children who aren't your own, how to regulate the amygdalae. Amygdalas. We're not Latin. We're not Roman. It's amygdalas. How to regulate the amygdalas of children who aren't her own, what she inadvertently does because of that poor boundary. She inadvertently dumps the responsibility onto the kids. Right? She makes them responsible for something that isn't their responsibility. It's what she's been doing. In her bio at the back of the book, Anna Housley-Juster mentions that, before she went to graduate school for 6 years, she was a Head Start instructor. I mean, she puts that in the first line of her bio, like it's something to be proud of. I mean, you're continuing the failure. You're continuing the failure as you introduce meditation to children, and for the same reason, because you're trying to take responsibility for something that isn't your own. I mean, it's just crazy. Like what kind of PBS fantasy world are you living in where you think that Head Start is some kind of success that you would want to put on the first line of your bio. I mean, it just shows the darkness. It shows the unlived life. I mean, it's like, are you going to tout how you were an executive for Enron? I mean, watch those old videos of Head Start, promoting Head Start. I mean, they, before, PC rounded off the rough edges, or smooth off the rough edges of words. They just came out and said, yeah, parents are taking care of their kids. They're not staying with them. They're not reading to them. So we'll just have the state do it. Yeah. Rather than, what can we do? Maybe this is a side point, whatever. Yeah, what can we do to make sure that parents, that the mother is the most likely to spend the most amount of time with their child? I mean, that's a healthier way to approach that problem. Not, I'll fix it. What are you going to fix, I mean, regulate your own amygdala. That is difficult enough. That's enough of a challenge. And it also says in her bio, Anna Housley-Juster's bio, that she has two daughters. Great, go take care of them. I mean, I just imagine a Traffic kind of situation. Remember that movie? Like, you're out fighting the war on drugs, meanwhile your daughter's at home, freebasing heroin with Topher Grace. I mean, I'm not trying to be mean. It's funny, but also just, you got to see the huge blind spots here. Although I will say, for the sake of being mean, I will say that I've never had a client who's had like a PhD, intellectual, career-driven mother who hasn't been extremely resentful. In fact, I think those are the kind of mothers who are at the receiving end of the most resentment. Not trying to be, too resentful or critical here. This is all to say, come join me. Come join me. It all comes down to how you relate with your unconscious, how you become aware of unconscious emotions, how you identify those unconscious emotions, and then how you can, how those unconscious emotions create your symptoms that you don't like. Your depression, the dread, the anxiety, the panic, the jealousy, the regret, the porn use, smoking weed all day, right? Those are not your problems. Those are your symptoms. Those are not your problems. You learn how to talk through an emotion however you feel it, and you connect with others. You become increasingly more aware of it, and you imagine that the symptom disappears. joinanimus.com/schedule. In saying all this, just to finish this off, I gotta say, and this is a reminder to myself as well as it's a reminder to you, because this is really easy to forget. As helpful as all this information on this channel is, and it is really helpful, and you put it, it can really help your development, your integration. It can take years off of it. It can definitely make it more complete, But it's not going to matter unless you move. None of this is going to matter unless you move. And by move, I mean move your mouth, because that's all moving is in a psychological context. I mean, it's just hilarious to me how we can learn about, and of course I include myself in this as well, we can learn about something like psychic objectivity and understand how important it is, intellectually get it, like, oh yeah, that's vital, and then never put it to use. joinanimus.com/schedule. My book is done. I don't know, just give a quick update on that. My book is done. I mean, I'm having somebody iron out some of the grammatical issues that I have, but it's done. So if you're a client, if you want to read it, I'll send it to you. Just email me. But yeah, it's good, and I like it, and I'm glad that it's done. It took a little bit longer than I thought it was going to. For several reasons. I think the main one is first of all, how do you know when a book is done? Like, that's scary. It's kind of scary to me, because I could just keep writing this book forever. But I think I'm going to save all the material that I'm not putting in. I'm just going to save for future books. I think it works better in a different context anyways. But also I think, I've had this theory of how psychotherapy works, like, my 3 principles of psychotherapy that I've been talking about here. I mean, this book is, in a sense, just fleshes out, it puts flesh on those ideas and really fills in the gaps. And I don't think I had all the gaps I mean, there were I had my own blind spots. I mean, nothing was wrong, of course. Yeah, like I would ever say anything wrong. But there were some spots I was missing. So I was trying to like engineer those parts of it while also writing the book. And it just caused a lot more friction. But it's done. I'm happy about that. And that's it. Thank you guys. And I wish you all the joy and pain that comes from seeing children for exactly what they are.